Welcome back, everyone, to House General and Finance. If the General and Finance, House General and Housing, and no one even with me.
I thought you did it on purpose.
No. And it is still February 20th. And if the room is a little disheveled, it's because of a certain birthday. There's been food distributed. But we are proceeding with our legislative council to discuss and possibly vote on H 775, which is the Rural Housing Finance Bill. We have with us Cameron Wood. Cameron, take it away.
For the record, Cameron Wood, Office of Legislative Counsel. I share my screen and we will walk through amendments. Is that okay? A little more? Is that good? Okay. So this is drafted as a strike all amendment, draft 2.1. If you all recall, yesterday we did a walkthrough with yesterday. At some point this week, we did a walkthrough of 1.1. This is 2.1. It has been edited. The highlighted language here is the highlighted language from 1.1 that we've already talked about, but it is different from the bill as introduced. And then there's also a section here that's been added that I will walk through here in a minute. You all recall the first change from the bill as introduced is you removed the sections related to the pilot housing program that was going to authorize tax stabilization for up to 300 homes in municipalities with less than 5,000 people. Those two sections were removed. So the first section you have here in the strike all is the special assessment bonds that John Gray walked through. So I'm not going to comment because nothing has changed from version 1.1 to this 2.1. This was the
bond bank stuff, right? Yeah.
The bond bank. Yep. So we're moving to section 2, which is the housing special fund. So if you all recall, section 2 is about credit facilities for the treasurer's office.
Right.
So all of this is still highlighted.
But it's unchanged from
the only change is the treasurer's office requested. So this version reflects a recommended change from the treasurer's office. There was a subdivision on the bottom of this section that said that for the 1% credit facility. So if you will recall, they have the authority for the 10%, you're bumping it up to 12.5, and then you're authorizing a 1% credit facility for the purpose of the offsite, and modular and bulk purchasing of housing, etc. There was a subdivision in here that said for that 1% credit facility, the treasurer's office would have to consult with Vermont Housing Conservation Board, Vermont Housing Finance Agency, the State Housing Authority, and I feel like there was one other entity there, it may have been the department. That was moved down to the pilot program, the modular construction pilot program. The treasurer's office, and I'm not trying to speak for them, I'm just stating what their concern as it was articulated to me was they already have to consult with the local investment advisory committee on these credit facilities and funds that are, or loans that are issued through these credit facilities. And they were concerned about creating a separate, somewhat committee of these entities that they would have to consult with in trying to get those monies out the door. So that was their concern. If you want to hear from them, I'd direct any of those questions to them. But it has been removed here and it's been added later. I'll get to it in just a second. Okay, so that section is about the credit facilities. The next section, section 3, which is on page 5, this is about the special fund. This is where the interest is going. The interest from those credit facilities goes into the special fund. The other change that I made at their request, treasurer's office request, you recall the credit facilities, they have that language that the treasurer has to invest the money in accordance with, the state's investments limitations, and they have to comply with the Uniform Investors Act, Uniform Prudent Investors Act. That language was in the C1 about the interest, and they requested that it be removed because they wanted more flexibility on the interest and more flexibility on being able to invest that interest. It's a lot less money. And it's interest on the loans issued, so you're not dealing with state, state funds that they hold. Remember, they create this credit facility and they're utilizing state's average cash on hand to do that. And so because this is just interest, because it's not the cash on hand, because they wanted additional flexibility, they wanted to remove that limitation. And so that was their request. I've done it in this draft. If you, have questions for them, I would have to direct those questions.
I just want to say to the committee, I'm comfortable with this because there's so many provisions that protect the funds of the state under their hands. This limited omission of the Uniform Investment Law, which has in it all kinds of detail,
Underwriting
requirements, it allows them to be a little more adventurous. I think it's a good thing.
Okay, so those are the first few amendments just based on the language that we've already reviewed together. So now we get to the offsite accelerator pilot program. And so what you'll see, the only change here is this addition of the C2. So where I mentioned earlier, you wanted the treasurer to consult with these entities for the credit facility. They were concerned about that because they already have to consult with their local investment advisory committee. So they recommended this be moved down here. So as part of this pilot program, if you recall in C, this is where the state treasurer can use funds to provide a guarantee for bulk purchasing of housing for the pilot program. So the treasurer's office was comfortable with having that consultation as it related to this program.
Which is what we really cared
And
about.
their recommendation was to move it here. So if the treasurer is going to fund the bulk purchasing for this pilot program, they need to consult with those entities before authorizing the use of the funds for that purpose. So I haven't changed the language, just moved it into this location. Okay. Now, moving on, we get to VHIP, no changes here. We get to Vermont Economic Development Authority. I walked through this language with you all last time under 1.1, but this is just amending the definition of what VEDA can fund. And it adds in that VEDA can fund multi-unit housing developments as long as they're not being financed by VHFA and as long as VHFA somewhat approves it, because it says it has to defer to VHFA. So I haven't changed any language there.
This is just adding another source of capital, which we felt would help rural housing.
Correct. So now we get to the language I've added in since we walked through 1.1. So you haven't seen this yet. Municipal plans. So this is language that currently exists in a bill that's on your wall. Nope, it's actually, I think, an environment. It was the administration's proposals packaged into a bill for this session. It's also in a Senate bill currently being considered by your counterpart, economic development.
It's their committee bill.
Their housing.
The feeling was we didn't know whether the administration's bill would move forward. We didn't know whether that Senate bill would get to us. And also we sat down with council, with Tom, you were there, right? Tom, DHCD, and can't remember. It was at least DHCD and essentially talked about it wasn't, the bill needed clarification. It wasn't, none of the substance changed at all. It just needed to be rewritten.
Well, I would say there's one substantive change in that. If you look at this language. So if you look at this language, this is adding a new section into the regional and municipal planning's chapter, Title 24. It's going in the subchapter related to municipal planning. So we're talking about municipal planning here. And it's a municipal plan shall identify and analyze existing and projected housing needs for the projected population of the jurisdiction and provide regulations that allow for the rehabilitation, improvement, or development of the number of housing units needed as identified in the land use plan, future land use map. Municipalities are not required to do these plans. This is saying if a municipality has their municipal plan, it shall include that information. Or, and that's the difference I was just gonna highlight.
Okay,
Was that the language as it originally came out had the municipality doing both of these things. And so this changed it to an or. So the municipality has to identify and analyze existing housing needs for the projected population. Or include an analysis, and I'm sub 2 here, include an analysis of regulatory and physical constraints, preventing the municipality from developing sufficient housing to meet the regional housing targets developed pursuant to subdivision 4348A9 of this title. 4348A subdivision A9 is the section that kind of requires DHCD to go publish the housing needs assessment. So we need to identify and analyze the housing needs for your projected population and provide the regulations that allow you to get there. Or do you need to include an analysis of the regulatory and physical constraints preventing you from developing the sufficient housing to meet the targets that have been outlined in the statewide housing needs assessment? There's a question.
Yes, Joe.
Both of those would still require you to open up your municipal plan and change it.
If a municipality is going to amend their municipal plan, they would be required to do one of those two.
Right, it's when, there's no time limits in this, so it's whenever they're amending their plan, yeah.
Correct.
So
Okay.
the
so-
idea, but go
Why
on.
would you have to?
Yeah, go
I've got a
ahead.
question
Yes,
or a comment, I guess. I would request that on the page above, there, that a municipal plan shall identify and analyze existing and projected housing needs for the projected population. My suggestion is, comma, including the needs of people with disabilities, comma, or including the needs of people with disabilities and housing suitable to accommodate them, comma.
I don't have a concern with adding that if you all would like to.
opinions?
I don't have a concern with that. Yeah, I like that. Do you think, I think that's great. Do you think that the or paragraph, that's enough to put it in the first one? Because then in the or, that would be, it's understood that you're explaining housing targets writ large to include those issues, Elizabeth?
I thought my understanding of the or is we're not going to do it.
Yeah,
So
So-
it's moot, right?
So I think you would add it in the one. The way I read this section is
Yes.
you're identifying your housing needs. Or if you're not going to identify your housing needs, you're going to identify the
Barriers.
regulatory and physical barriers to why you can't meet the housing
Right,
targets in the housing needs
and
assessment.
it could easily be partly, we can meet part of the needs, but we can't meet all of them, here's why, right?
but I guess what I'm just trying to underline is if Elizabeth wants to, if we want to make sure that that there's a lens on the needs of people with disabilities, do we want to write something in the second, in the explanation of why you can't meet housing targets, that something acknowledging that there are housing targets that are specific to demographic needs, to certain demographics?
I don't know that there are any housing targets specific to individual with disabilities or some other special need. There is, you all passed last year the report from the study committee to try to identify a plan to generate the housing for individuals with, certain disability needs. And I don't remember the exact language of what the committee was charged with looking at. Part of their recommendation is incorporated in the Senate's committee housing bill to.
That's a separate issue.
Yes, ma'am. What I'm driving towards is I'm trying to point out that I don't believe there is any housing needs report that identifies the housing targets for this population. So I wouldn't reference it in 2 because I don't know that it exists.
We could just say, include an analysis, this is 2, of the regulatory and physical constraints preventing municipalities from developing sufficient housing to meet the regional housing targets identified in the plan. And developed pursuant to. In other words, in 1, we've said, you should look at in 1, we've added that when they look in the plan, they have to look at developmentally disabled disabilities. It's true. What he says is housing targets, there's nothing in the housing targets. It's
No, I
just,
get that, right.
yeah, so we could just say in the plan.
So keep in mind, this is 1 is saying in your municipal plan, you shall identify and analyze your protected housing needs and provide for regulations that are going to allow for you to get to the needs that you've identified. I understand the point of wanting to add in, including the housing needs for this population of people.
Right, which is something that it would be new,
Yes. and
that is
outside
not
of the
in
43,
43, 48.
Exactly. And
Right.
so 2 is saying if you're not going to do that, then
Right.
you need to identify the barriers that are preventing you from hitting your housing targets. I think you could include something in there about barriers for hitting housing targets for this population. My point is, I don't think there are housing targets for subsets of populations of people. So I don't know that it makes sense to reference it here.
In the second portion,
Correct.
yes. What it sounds like to me is it feels like if you're just by leaving it, if you're not including it in the second portion, that in and of itself could be a barrier. The inability to meet the needs of people with disabilities is a barrier in and of itself. If what, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes,
So
ma'am, I
I'm
do.
saying that, go ahead.
No, but I think you're spot on. Yes. If you're not identifying the housing targets for this subset of population in the statewide housing needs assessment, that itself may be a barrier to you being able to identify the housing needs for your own municipality in 1. That's what I'm interpreting you're saying.
Yeah. So if it's in 1, but not in 2, then that can be a barrier.
But I think you would want to potentially this would be something referring to or deferring to DHCD, who's responsible for developing the statewide housing needs assessment, which is a federal requirement. You may want to ask them whether or not you can, or whether or not it's appropriate to require in their statewide housing needs assessment an identification of the housing needs for any subset of the population.
Let's see, Representative Bartley, you have a question? You're online now, right?
Yeah, sorry, in the car. Not a question. Cameron actually just said everything I was going to suggest. I think maybe we take this time, if it's something the committee feels strongly about, to address the housing needs assessment and make that recommendation to change the language there, because then I think it would automatically trickle down to this language if we address it in the housing needs assessment.
And I can go look, I mean, again, the statewide housing needs assessment is a federal requirement. I don't know what in the federal regulations it says, if anything, about identifying population needs or housing targets for specific population needs. And that's what I'm saying, DHCD may know right off the top of their head, oh, it actually does have this little thing
Positive that
here.
Could you, I'll tell you what I would
I can check.
suggest. I think there are some other questions and I have some, but would you just finish this section first?
Yes, okay. So again, municipal plan, if you're going to create one, you're going to amend one. It must now include this, either identifying your housing target needs and how you're getting there, or if not, identifying what the barriers are to getting there. If you're going the second route, it must also include this information under these subdivisions, which includes a quantification of your existing and projected needed housing types, including location, age, condition, and occupancy required to accommodate existing and estimated population projections,
It's in there, yeah.
inventory of sites, including zoned, unzoned, vacant, underutilized, potential redevelopment sites, an analysis of any constraints to housing development, such as zoning, development standards, infrastructure needs. A detailed, I'm on sub D now, a detailed description of what actions the jurisdiction may take to accommodate the projected housing. The projected needed housing types, including updates to specific zoning or municipal bylaw provisions, updates to specific infrastructure, including municipal water. So it's saying, if you're not gonna identify the housing here, and you're gonna identify the barriers to housing, you need to give us all of this detailed information. So I see it as somewhat of a, I don't know whether this is an intention or not. I'm just saying, I see it as a somewhat of a, if you're gonna go that second route and tell us what's preventing you from doing all this housing, you're gonna go through all of this extra work to identify all of this additional pieces of information.
Okay, go on.
Okay, now you just have a sub B and a sub C, which would apply to both. So this applies in the section generally. The housing element, and there was a recommendation from Ellen in our office to change this to element because it's an element of the plan.
Right.
Housing element of the municipal plan may incorporate by reference any information or policies identified in other housing needs assessments adopted by the governing body, identified in the regional plan, or published in the statewide housing needs assessment. So you can incorporate information that's, already published in other areas. The amount, and then this is in the sub C, the amount of detail provided in the analysis beyond the minimum criteria is at the discretion of the legislative body. Nothing stopping you from going into much further detail than you, if you so choose. And then that's the end of this section. I will state there was a potential recommendation to include a subsection that required the regional planning commissions to provide assistance to municipalities. And I would argue when you go back to the regional planning commission's duties, they're already required to do that. So
Okay.
I didn't feel the need to put it in here. They are required to assist the municipalities. Whether or not they all have the capacity to do this stuff, something you may, hear that they do not, or you may hear from witnesses of whether they do. And then that's the only other change. So no other amendments to the bill.
Okay. We have this on our agenda again after lunch. I believe that there is a pressure on us if we favor this to act, because it has to have a drive-by at least to House government operations. It's going to go to House Ways and Means. It's going to go to House Appropriations. That's a long path. We only have next week before the break. After the break, the last week before crossover is crazy. It's just crazy. I mean, it's a time for us to look at everything else. So I feel, I have to tell you that if this is something the committee likes, I feel pressure for us to act today if possible. In order to act today, we have to give instructions to council to make any changes that in this draft that we want, for example. So one is that we add a reference to individuals with individuals with disabilities to the first paragraph. When I look at the text of the second paragraph, if you can't make those, all the things you have to show, it's broken down by population. And so I think it's in there. However, I do have a question for you, council. My assumption has been that many towns will say, yes, we can meet some. My assumption has been, yes, we can meet some of the housing needs, but we can't meet all, and here's why. Do you see this as either or? Like they have to go 1 or 2? Can they do 1 and 2? Do we need to put to put into 2 to the extent that the agency, the town cannot, concludes it cannot meet the housing targets as per A, it needs 1 or whatever it is, then.
That's a good question. I will say, I don't think there's anything that's gonna stop a municipality from doing both if they so choose. I think if you wanted to specify that if you cannot meet all of your housing needs, then you must do number 2. It may be worth a clarification.
Or all or part. No, that if you started 2 by saying to the extent that to the extent that a town, or what is it, municipal government determines it cannot meet the housing needs in 1, comma, then it shall undertake the following or something.
Right.
I mean, I can see a lot of towns are going to say, yeah, we can do some, we just can't make all of them. Joe,
I'm just, where did all the language for this come from for
the administration's bill.
so wasn't Alex
It's
in,
revised a little.
wasn't Alex in here telling us like how simple it would be to like, if you can't meet them, just let us know why?
Mhm.
Why do I have to put it into my town plan? To just let them know why? Would that be
That's gonna.
in a document to,
If it's not already in
Do you
your town plan, if it's already in your town plan, you just submit that.
nobody's town plan has all this in it. So why you're not getting your housing targets?
So you think
Not
a single
2
town
should be,
has
what
it.
is you want to put it back up just for a second? I just want to get to the point where we have given him enough so that after lunch, he's coming back with a draft.
Legislative body.
Yes,
Well, I also want to know, we're going to discuss now about the community action, CVOEO request for the funds, or we're going to wait until after lunch?
the CVOEO. Remind me,
The,
That's
community
it.
action asking for a full-time, help me out.
yes, identify yourself.
Amy Schollenberger, I believe, President was talking about the mobile home program request that was referred to earlier, and our understanding was you said you wanted to put language into this bill instead of the budget.
This is for,
It's for outreach in and advocacy work in the mobile home parks. It would bring it to a state, support a statewide program. The program is administered by CVOEO, but all of the caps participate.
I think we should put it, I don't think it belongs here, and I think I made a mistake. I think the question is. Personally, I don't think it belongs here. I'm wondering if we put it in the landlord tenant bill,
Oh, that's,
but let's come back to that. I think I made a
The
mistake.
request was for the budget memo.
The budget memo,
And
yeah,
I think they were confused about what we have in this.
yeah, yes, well,
You thought there was like a portion of the treasurer's 10.
I don't know, but it's not. Oh, God. We'll come back to the budget memo in the afternoon. Okay, we got to do that. I'm sorry, everyone. I apologize.
Yeah.
Okay. Planning for housing targets. Go past 1, okay, to 2. No. How about, I'm asking, how about we just say provide to DHCD instead of saying include? See, go up there. Two, it says include. What if we were to say provide to DHCD?
It's also, it says it has to be in your town plan to start.
Yeah, the start.
At the start of this whole thing,
municipal plan.
Yes.
Means that every single town in the state of Vermont now has to open their municipal town plan
Well.
and have either of these in it. Or the next time they do it, which might be 9 years from now. And this is absolutely pointless at that point.
There is no timeline.
Exactly. So I mean, it's not 9, I think it's 7 years your town plan's good for. I think it's 7. That's not random recollection.
We're
But
trying to get info now. Your point is,
this just seems so not congruent with what Alex was talking about when he was here.
And I have a question. Hello? Hi.
Yes, go ahead.
I do, that does make sense, Joe. I agree. Also, what's the Cameron, what's the enforcement of this?
There is none.
So this is just, you do this and tell us, or just thanks?
The funny thing
for
is it's not even tell them. They're gonna have to go look for everyone's town plan to see what they wrote. Doesn't even, I
Yeah,
don't see where it directs
something's-
you to tell them.
I'm sorry to hold us up, but yeah, something about this doesn't make sense.
So it says, just to answer, I didn't see anything in the amendments section after a very quick glance, but it does say in the section 4387 that all plans, including all prior amendments, shall expire every 8 years unless they are readopted according to the procedures in the amendment section. So
Your town plan's
So
good for-
this is just to get the data if they can, and then they might, and then it's just more, and it's work for municipalities.
Here's what's going on. There are a whole bunch of requirements on municipal plans. None of them have timelines. They're just, here's what you have to have in your plan. This is a first step. What we're doing is adding to the requirements of what's in your plan. But you've got to look at your housing targets and see if you can meet them and if so indicate. If you can't, then you have to tell us.
Why?
Why not? Joe is making a good point. Do you have to tell us why not in your plan or in some other way? And I think he's got a good point. I
agree.
I think it could be, put it in your plan, and to the extent you can't, communicate with DHCD all the following.
And there is no enforcement though.
There's no enforcement for any of it.
Okay, I understand. I'm
No,
just making sure
I'm
so
just
that
saying, yeah.
if a municipality is worried, nothing bad will happen.
Can I
Uh,
make a
I-
suggestion?
Yes,
Understanding that, I mean, I think from all of our conversations regarding this, even though there have been little, we wanted it to be simplified. We wanted this to be a tool for the legislator to understand what the barriers are, but didn't want to burden municipalities. Since we have a decent belief that this language will be included in the Senate bill, does it make sense to maybe take this language out of this bill, allow the Senate bill to come to us, and if it's struck out or it's not there, we just have more time to kind of craft this the way that it makes the most sense as it comes over from the Senate?
the reason for, we can do that. The reason for putting it in is that I have no idea whether the Senate bill will get to us. And I don't know whether if it is, that it'll be referred to us as
Gotcha.
opposed to environment.
Yeah,
And
okay.
so we wanted something that would be out there that would make it happen.
can I
Yes.
suggest, what if we crafted language in that first line that's, currently it says a
Could
municipal
you share your screen
plan
again?
it currently reads a municipal plan shall. To add something like a municipality shall, through its municipal planning process or independently, do this, a survey, and we're asking
And
for
just
you
put a check
to
on the box.
complete. Yeah, just, well, the way that Cameron has presented it to us is exactly the way that that DHCD came into committee with their ask. Their ask is please incorporate housing targets in municipal planning. And so I don't know whether their reason for doing it this way was as a way to incorporate housing but not burden, whether that was the balance they were trying to achieve. But if we're trying to get more information back, if that's the urgency, but we don't want to burden municipalities, then giving them the option to do it through their municipal plan activities or outside of those municipal plan
I
activities.
think that the way to do that would be to leave A as it is with the addition suggested by Elizabeth. And then when you get to B, it would be or to the extent the plans are not, the targets are not achieved, to provide DHCD an analysis, blah, 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 blah. Wouldn't that do it? What?
I'm just saying that it can happen outside of your municipal plan, because right now this is mandating that it happens in your municipal plan.
What I'm saying is that one would say it would be a choice. No, wait. It does mean this whole long section is filled with things that have to be in municipal plans.
Yeah,
And we are adding to what has to be in municipal plans
yeah.
is an identification of existing housing and needs and accommodating the projected population. I think that they really want. It's a minimum thing. We're saying these housing targets are real. It's time to put them in the planning statute. What we're doing is providing an off-ramp, if I may quote, and the off-ramp is to say, and that's why it's or, to say to the extent that they're not accommodated, then you have to inform DHCD why. That's what I'm proposing we change. But it would be in the plan. That's the idea.
Right.
The reason that I feel like if we want to make it more of a requirement for planning, we're going to have to take it out because we don't have to take testimony from the league. The league has signed off on this idea as it is. I think that if we said that all that other stuff doesn't have to be in the plan, like Joe said, I think that makes sense. In other words, the plan should just say, here's our housing needs, here which we're going to accommodate. I think the other could be a memo to DHCD.
Yeah.
How do people feel?
I'd have to mull it over.
I think this is just a reporting requirement.
The second part is, yeah.
Well, no, if it's already in the town plan, they can report that. They can. provide
Yes,
a plan.
yes.
If we're going to change the requirements for what's in the plan, that's Title 24. That there are definitions of what has to be in the town plan elsewhere in statute.
Right.
Where we need to, if we want to add criteria or be more specific about them, we need to change it somewhere else. Because that informs the plan they've got, that informs what they have.
I thought this added something to the municipal plan requirement.
Yeah, this
Yeah, this is
is going in Title 24 in the chapter related to municipal plan.
This is going into Title
Right,
24.
but if we change that, if we're going to add this is reporting on what's already required in chapter 24.
Does chapter 24 contain material on housing plans?
Yes.
No, I mean on accommodating housing?
No.
This adds it.
So, but if I'm back to it, it should be in, get that.
At 24, we say
4388. Should be 4382. In the list of what a municipal plan should have.
There's a list.
There is a list in 4382.
So
And item 10 is housing element shall include recommended program for addressing low and moderate income persons' housing needs as identified by the regional planning commission. It addresses income thresholds, but not accommodating.
Council, do
probably-
you think that we should be amending this section to add?
I don't think you're needing to, no. There may, if it's going in its own section, it's still going to be applicable. So as mentioned, this is in Title 24, 4382, just so you're all aware, right, the kind of apologies for all the moving around, the kind of construct here, right? This is all in Title 24, Chapter 117, Municipal Regional Planning Development. So this is where you have municipal planning commissions, the regional planning commissions, all of their structure, all of their duties, all of their requirements, et cetera. And then you're getting to this municipal development plan, authorization for municipalities to do their municipal plans, what has to be in the plan. And so that's the section we're referring to specifically, this 4382. When you go here, talks about the plan has to be consistent, et cetera, and then all of the information that has to be in the plan. And it does have to include a housing element that shall include a recommended program for public and private actions to address housing needs and targets identified by the Regional Planning Commission pursuant to the statewide housing needs assessment. The program shall use data on year-round and seasonal dwellings, the information that was just mentioned. I don't think you need to amend that if you don't want to. It may make sense. There's a lot of detail to have its own separate section to say that this information is going to have to include all of this. It's going in that same subdivision. So it would exist, you know, right here under the, can't highlight it, right under the 4387. It's going to go right there. And so I could tweak this lead-in language to say, you know, reference back to this 10. But that's why I changed it. If you recall, that's why I changed it to housing element earlier, because that's what it's referred to here as a housing element. So long story short, I don't think it needs to go, I wouldn't propose breaking this 10 down into a bunch of different subdivisions. I think having it as a standalone section is okay.
Okay, so private actions to address housing targets as identified by the Regional Planning Commission. Regional Planning Commission, so the housing needs assessment includes data about households with disabilities. But their housing targets don't. At the moment. So is the play, if we were going to, and part of my brain is still thinking about Elizabeth's point. Is it in the Regional Planning Commission that direction needs to come from then? If anywhere.
What direction?
To have and built into this plan an element that is specific to
Housing targets for individuals or a
Individuals with
subpopulation of people?
I don't know.
I think it's gonna be up to you as far as at what level do you want that? I don't know that the region, we're straying into an area that I'm not familiar with. So if you have detailed questions that you want about regional plans, I would refer you to Ellen. That's kind of in her portfolio. So what I don't know is I don't know if a regional plan is required to outline how a municipality is going to get to their housing targets. I'm assuming not, because I don't think an RPC doesn't have the authority to enact specific, zoning and policies and bylaws for municipalities to meet the housing needs of that municipality. So I think if you're going to include what Representative Burrows is recommending, it's probably best at the town level, not the regional level, but
Would the region not identify it as a need you need to look at?
he doesn't know.
So what I'm thinking is there's this bit in our bill is probably not the place to put it. Wherever it is defined that this and that need to be addressed in the municipal plan, that might be where we want to put it.
And that's where I go back to, I think that's what direction would you all like to go with that? You had the report from the study committee about how to develop a statewide plan for the development of housing for this population of individuals, where you think it's appropriate for that to exist. Is it at the state level? Is it at a regional level, which, you know, I don't know to what extent an RPC is going to have access to the type of information to know how to develop housing for a population of individuals. I don't know that a municipality would. It's possible. So that's where I can't answer. I just don't know where you all would like to stick that requirement and where it makes the most sense. My recommendation would start with the report that came out from that study committee. That was, you all directed them to come up with a state plan to develop housing for individuals with with disabilities. So
I think we have different questions before us. One is, are we going to stick a reference into one of disability? Number two, or are we going to leave it out and deal with it at another level separately? That's one issue. Another issue is in two, are we going to limit to not, are we going to say all that if you don't, to the extent that you cannot accommodate the housing targets, you have to explain in a memo the following, or are we going to make them put it in the plan? And the larger issue is, are we going to, my feeling is either we're going to deal with this today or we're going to strip it. I just don't, we're out of time.
Elizabeth has
Yeah.
a response.
Elizabeth.
Thanks. I looked through all of the VHFA reports on housing and the demographics report, sections of those reports for the last several years. And currently in the state of Vermont, there are 268 total rental units that are for people with disabilities. My thought is that it's not necessarily, I just want it to be said out loud. I want it to be addressed somewhere that we know that we live in an aging state. We know that we don't address the fact that we we have a massive 90,000. Currently, the number of people with disabilities in the state is 90,000, according to VHFA. And we're not addressing their housing needs. And my feeling is that by simply putting it into a local requirement, it's actually at that granular level easier to manage as far as collecting data or addressing it. Thanks.
Okay. First of all, before we deal with disabilities, how do people feel about changing into a memo? Yes, Joe.
It helps, but it's still not, it just doesn't jive for me what the whole point of this is and timeline. So with it in there, I mean, with it in there for me, if the options are work on it or strip it, then I'm gonna strip it. Because the whole point of this thing is to try and figure out what towns need. Like that was Alex's thing, like, we already kind of know what we're going to hear from towns. We just want to see it in writing so that it can direct us legislatively to where to funnel things to in what towns maybe. So the idea that like, even if you kept like this, the or section became just like a report to DHCD, section 1 might be 5 years from now. Your town might be like, yeah, we can definitely do the first section there, but we're not opening my town plan because we just finished it up and we're good for, I'm not redoing my town plan, which isn't redo. It's, it's a lot easier process than I make it sound, but they'll go through the whole processing, opening it up and timelines that go with that. Just to add this in for information that you could just tell them. They could purely, the whole thing could just be a separate document to DHCD.
What do you want to do, folks?
Well, DHCD requested the information.
They,
requested this
DHCD is
legislation.
proposing this
request-
language
yeah.
and the league is supportive of this language.
Oddly enough, they're the ones that requested this. But number one, like I said, why would you put it in your town plan if they just want the information? And number two, it never tells you to give them the information.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. They requested it, but they didn't ask for them to give it to them.
Now
So
they
I
have to
think
go
we
through
just
everyone's
need to-
town plan to see what they wrote.
We just need to pivot. So I think the goal is ultimately, it doesn't need to be put in the town plan. It just needs to be, collect this information and get it to the people who requested it.
Okay, yeah.
And there's a whole lot that goes along with that. By when? Like,
That's simple.
what's the document like?
I'm like, wait.
If it's a generous timeline,
I
I
think
think
there's-
that's still,
I think that there's two goals. I think that there is the goal of getting some kind of survey response back on a granular level of what challenges are and where. There is also a goal, I think, in telling municipalities that when you do a town plan, you should refer to the housing targets. And if your town plan cannot promise to reach those housing targets, explain why.
So it doesn't, we're not telling them to
Whenever
redo it,
you
whenever they
do a
redo it.
plan.
Yeah. I like that.
I mean, part of it is giving reality to the housing targets. We're saying essentially, we've gone to all this trouble to create these housing targets. So we want to make them real. To make them real, you put them in your plan. But if you can't, then so there's two separate goals. One is just to
That's what I
make the
just
housing
said.
targets real. Yes.
Are
Another
you
goal.
chair-splaining?
Yes, I am. So one is I am emphasizing what was
Thank
just
you.
said. One goal is an actual standalone goal, which is saying, let's take all this work on housing targets and make them real, which apparently has been supported by the league. Then the second is to provide an off-ramp by saying, well, of course, here in paragraph 1, if you notice, it doesn't refer to the housing targets developed by section 4348. It doesn't refer to that. It just says it just says identify the housing needs. But 2 says, if you can't make it, tell us why. So I'm proposing that we leave 1 and we include provide DHCD for 2. I'm also proposing that I know that I think we could say provide. I'm afraid that if we put a timeline on it, we're not going to get support.
What about just when they're doing their plan?
That's what this.
Well, Joe's sort of saying like, when is the hell is that going to happen? But I think that it would happen, the whole thing is going to happen over time. It's not going to happen right away. So,
tied to the plan, it's not.
yeah, well, the problem is if you don't go through the exercise of the planning exercise, if you bother doing the planning exercise, you're either going to you're not going to bother doing that except for the planning exercise.
They may not be revising their town plans, but they are all in conversation with the regional planning commissions this year
Yeah,
about
right.
their future land use. So it's on their table between here and the end of the year to have that conversation with the regional planning commission.
So-
Because it's your 3 map.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just about.
So are you saying you would be happier if this whole thing was a report and a date rather than
It's
just
a
referring?
report, right? I don't know if I use the word report, but I meant, each town submit. you know, and this has been part of their conversation with their own planning commissions, some point in the course of this year. Can they, what is their plan to meet the projected housing targets? And if not, it just as simple, it could be like 2 lines. I don't know if the regional planning commissions could aggregate this. Because they're already talking about it. Although there might be more. Well,
Believe me, unless we're making, if you want to make this something like, instead of saying a municipal plan shall, if you want to say municipalities shall, without a reference to the plan, do all this.
and if they want to reference their plan, that's great.
Yeah, if you want to do it without a plan, then at this point, we can do that. I'm just saying, whatever we do, we have a choice. Either it's very simple and he can make the change now so we can vote on it after lunch, or else we strip it out, just forget it. Which way do you want to go?
It's, I'm in favor of being simple and asking for the information. Just as simply as we can.
Well, but I don't want to, if you want to simplify this, let's take it out. Because that's another whole job that's
That's
going to
another
take.
task.
And if we change a lot of it, we're going to have to take testimony, et cetera, and all of that.
I don't think so. Not if you just put the municipalities shall, as they're currently doing this, because that's a valid point. Everyone is looking at these new tiers, new maps, new zoning. Everyone's having to go through all of this right now with the way everything is changing. So if, as they're doing this, then that it can be in a congruent with the same.
No, I agree.
Yeah, with the same
If we
time, if you're
just-
looking for a timeline,
With the, and I would have to introduce, most of these conversations are about land use.
Right.
Not the actual house.
right?
So
Depends what city, what towns.
I think at this point, I'm in favor of taking it out because we just don't have a clear idea how best to do it at the moment. Doesn't mean not do it, but I don't think we can iron it out.
Well, I think
You know,
I suggest we put it in the way that the agency asked and the way that the league has agreed upon. Because it allows, like, at least it becomes another conversation in the next,
it's more likely to get attention in the next
Yeah.
one if it's in there.
yeah.
Okay.
And it's like, why say no if right now it's not very onerous,
Yeah, okay.
Just take the
And
plan
it doesn't have a
portion out.
timeline, it doesn't have
Don't mandate it
consequences.
as a plan. is what
Right,
you're
it's
saying.
just trying to universalize.
DCHD and the league are okay with it. They
Right.
must see something.
Yeah,
They do
Yeah,
this every day,
they're
so.
just like, when you do your plan, make sure to look at the targets, and if you can't do the targets, then indicate why not, and
Well,
if we don't have any kind of remedy for what happens to you if you don't, I think they
Yeah.
want to keep it that way, then
if they say this will work,
unless we want some kind of
it'll either
enforcement.
work. Or we can ask them to change it.
Right. I mean, I personally am fine with just the change that everything in 2 is in a report.
Okay.
There you go.
I'm okay with that. And what I'm going to suggest, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to suggest the following. Council. Would you, and those people, feel free to someone yell at me if you disagree. I'm going to say, council, will you make the change about adding into 1 disabilities that turn 2 into the extent that, et cetera, and provide DHC an analysis of. And rewrite it, and then after lunch, which will be at 1:15. Okay, is that okay? 1:30,
Half an hour?
1:30?
1:30.
1:30 is fine, but before you finish,
wait.
when is the analysis due by?
Okay, I'm afraid that if we add a date, then we're gonna have to take testimony.
Okay,
So all I'm proposing is, I'm just trying to get us a draft. So we'll reconvene at 1:30. Everybody think about it. I'll take a straw poll. Okay, after lunch. I'll take a straw poll. And we'll just go do it. And if we can't do it, we'll strip it out. Okay? And then we'll take a poll, then we'll take a vote on the bill without it or with it.
Okay.
How's that? It's just a way of moving. I just want to move this.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Lunch at 1 till 1:30. We are adjourned.